Hey guys, another day, another new bathroom renovation. Today I'm going to show you how I tile around this window, installing tile trim with the thin edge facing for more of a designer finish. This bathroom is a pretty sweet design with some bamboo looking feature tiles and a bit of herringbone in these niches, so I'm sure I'll make one or two more videos on this one. Anyway, let's jump into this window. So we've got a typical window here. This one's in the shower, but yours could be anywhere. The same principles apply. It's the same even when tiling a niche. So the outside of the window gets tiled first, and as I'm laying trim with the thin side facing, it means I need to overlap the tiles around the window, but I'll get into more detail on that in a minute. For the tile setup, generally when setting out a bathroom, if I can get a full tile off the bottom of the window and niches, it will for one always look nicer, and two, it will make life a bit easier, especially with big tiles, and these ones are 1.2 by 600. This is because it will eliminate L cuts on the bottom of the window or niche, which is handy, especially if the walls are not that great, as funny enough, tiles do not bend, although I'm sure some plasterers think they do. So in an ideal world, everything would be flat and level, but that is not normally the case, unfortunately. For me on this one, coming a full tile off the bottom of the window doesn't really work out that nice with the niche and a few other things. So after checking a few other areas to set out from, in the end I found if I can raise the niche height a bit, I can get a full tile running through the bottom of that and just about get a full tile running through the top of the window. It leaves me with an evil L cut at the bottom of the window, but to get two things to work out good, I'll take the L cut and the pane, and I'll go with that. This is kind of the art of setting out tiles, trying to get as many things as good as you can and taking compromise in some areas. Very rarely does everything work out exactly how you'd like, but if you can reason and justify your set out, then that's all good. So I've drawn some lines around the room for the tile height. I altered the niche and re-waterproofed it. It works out that once the top is tiled, including the overlap, it will finish about 5mm to the edge of the top of the window frame. So another good thing I do here is to alter the rest of the window so that everything is symmetric around it. This again just adds to that overall finish. So here I'm adding some 10mm backerboard to the bottom and left side of the window and 6mm to the right side. That should make everything symmetric, so once the tiling is done, all the sides should finish with that 5mm to the frame, the same as the top. For the width, there's a couple of choices like centering the window, but as my window has a small strip on the left side, I see no point in that. So I'm actually going to run a full tile down the right hand side, which at the moment you may think is a weird choice, but it will make sense later. Trust me, it links back to my justifying the set out comment. So this is the trim for this one, a cream metal to match the tile. It's 10mm deep, the same thickness as the tile. So if you were tiling this window now with the trim the standard way, you would just cut the tiles to the frame like this and the trim would just sit on top and you would fill in the inside. But for me, as I want the trim thin side facing, the tile needs to be overlapping the window by the thickness of a tile plus adhesive. Then the trim slots in like this. Then again you would just fill in the inside of the window after. Once I've tiled around the outside, I'll place the bottom trim in first, followed by the top and then the two sides to hold it all in place nicely. Now having at least some flat walls when you've got L cuts involved is quite vital, otherwise it'd be hard to marinate the trim nicely. My walls here are about 6mm out of level, so I'll be using different size trowels to bring that back over the tiles bottom to top. As these are large heavy tiles, I start at the bottom first. I'll leave a link in my description for my guide on installing large format tiles, but here I'm basically spreading the wall and the tile. As my walls are a bit out of level, I'll start with bigger trowels down the bottom and working back to smaller trowels as I get to the top. This should bring us back to flat and level. Using level clips as I go, as these are large tiles, they will be bowed like a banana. The most important thing for me is that when I get to the top of the window, my full tile runs through where it should. So I've drawn a few lines down from the window to work to, so as long as I hit them, we should be all good. So I'm always checking for upright and flatness as I go, as it will just make sure that when I meet above the window, everything will marinate nicely. It doesn't matter as much with small tiles, but with big tiles, you want to make sure you're at least flat. So I've just got that ridiculously difficult cut out. That's basically a whole tile and quite a sliver, but that's the worst cut of this job. When I set it out, I knew if I wanted a full tile off the top, full tile off of there, I'd have to suffer with this cut. So it took a little bit of time just to be careful with it basically so I didn't break it with the grinder, but it's off. So I can stick that in there, tile around the window. I'll probably have to put a prop up for because it's quite a big bit of tile up here. Then I can get to the trim work. So you'll see here now I've gone down to a 6mm trowel on the walls to help keep them level, and I'm making sure either sides of the window are flat together. Right, now both sides are up, this bottom trim can actually go in now, and I normally like to do the bottom, top, and then the two sides. It just helps doing the top last because the sides can prong that up a little bit as well. You've got, depending on what you've got above it. I mean, I've got quite a big heavy tile above it here, so I'm going to have to use an Acro stand anyway, but I can prop it up, put the trim in, then put the Acro on the trim and sort it all out. But you can use the trim a little bit to help you out there. So yeah, just going to get this tile sorted, and then I'll cut this and I'll show you putting the trim in place. Okay, for our first bit of trim, our bottom trim, as I said earlier, I've got this bit here, which is to match the tiles. It's going to go in like that. So I've got an offcut, but you would just quite simply mark it from tile to tile across like this. Get your mark, and then you can place it in. But as I've got an offcut here, which should fit, I can just cut this one down. And then whack her in. So that'll be the first bit of trim. I'll just go and cut that with my metal blade and my angle grinder, which will go straight through it. Okay, so metal blade in my cordless here. This is the mark. And I like to just try and draw a straightish line. So you've got something to go to. That's the bit we want. So you can just make sure you keep that bit good. And you can just take off the corner bits. Okay, and you're generally on metal trim, if you use a grinder, be left with some knobbly bits like this, but you just take an old rubbing block and you can just smooth it up so there's no sharp bits. Okay, there's no sharp bits there now, and that's looking pretty good. So if it fits, that's good on first impressions. We've still got adhesive behind the tile here that's still wet, so this will just push up into the trim to hold it into place as she goes in. I'll just push it down into the adhesive like so. Give her a little rub and then clean off the excess adhesive behind it. A little sponge. Just so when you come to put your seal on, you don't have adhesive behind it blocking it, so use your finger or your sponge to just clear out the back. Give her a wipe. And that is our first bit of trim on. Now, just show you with the camera. So, once I put a few more on, I'll actually tape this down and get it all nice and flat. So when it sets, it all looks good. So yeah, it's good to have like gaffer tape here to just tape the edges down. It'll be a bit springy, as you can see there, but we'll get it all nice and tight. So next thing is tile this side, tile this side. Got to really get the top cut on to put that top trim in, then the two sides. So I'm going to crack on with that now. But you can get to a situation, obviously we've got adhesive behind the tile here, where if it takes a bit of time doing this, the adhesive obviously goes off. I mean, this is a medium set, so I've got an hour or so on it, hour or two. If it does go off and you can't poke your trim in, it's not the end of the world. You can just cut 5mm or whatever it is off the back of the trim, just cut through the trim and you'll be able to slot it in still. So just punching on through here, it's pretty straightforward as we have no L cuts now with this set out. I'm just as usual keeping a check on levels and flatness as I go. The other good thing when you overlap tiles is if your window is a bit pissed, then you can use this to level the frame up. For the cut above the window, I just mark the cut to the ceiling using my level to judge it, as ultimately the ceiling is a bit pissed. Then once I cut the tile, I just put it in place and use my pen to scribe the rest of the bump out of the ceiling, and then she was good to go. Right, I've got my tile cut for the top there. Obviously it's a big piece and there's only this left corner holding it up. You can use a bit of wood, but I like to use like these little miniature Acro stands, which are quite good, which you can put underneath, extend them just to hold it up. There'll be some levelling clips in the right side which will hold it, take a bit of the weight off of it that side. But yeah, I'll leave a link in my description. These just come off of Amazon, but they're very handy if they're quite cheap as well. But yeah, I'll leave a link in the description. But they're very good for just holding that tile up until it sets. So last couple of tiles here before the trim work, and with that big heavy one I just have my prop set and ready to go so I don't get stuck holding a big tile in midair. Then again I just check for flatness from the bottom of the window to the top. That is now the outside of the window all tiled, so I can concentrate on getting these bits of trim in before the adhesive starts going off. So I mark and cut the top trim the same as I did with the bottom, and now I have the level clips taking the main weight of the tile. It allows me to quickly remove the prop and get the trim in. As I'm spreading the wall and the tile, it has incredibly good suction, so it won't move that much anyway. Again, I clean any excess adhesive behind the trim to not block my inner tile once I put it in. Then using my tape measure, I just mark the two sides by measuring point to point, cut them to size and then just slot them in. Now that's the stressful bit done, I can just relax and fine tune everything using some tape to make sure everything is nicely marinated before it all sets. Right, it's the next day now. I've removed all the levelling clips from that, so I've given it all a nice clean up, all the tape's off. So it's all looking good, and like I say, this can just be done whenever now, the internals of it. Pretty self-explanatory, you would just mark here, do the sides first, the top, and then the bottom, but yeah, just mark here, put this one in, put this one in. Same on this side. Put the top, which on mine is one piece of big tile, and then put the seal on, and because we're in a shower, it'll have a full going on it. And because we pat the sides out, this should all marinate about 5mm when it's tiled away from the edge of the window there, which is not a bad silicone joint, but it should all look symmetrically the same around it. And just as I mentioned earlier, with the set out, which you probably thought, well, that's a weird way of setting it out. You may see now that it makes sense that you've basically got full tiles starting off of this side of this alcove here. And then this is basically what comes off, and then this eliminated me having to have an L cut running through the window, which again, like I said, the walls aren't brilliant, makes life a bit easier, so it just looks like the full tile is continuing around. Obviously, like I said, I had to deal with one L cut here, which I got it off, but it wasn't the nicest cut in the world to do. But yeah, that's basically my my setting out on the window. And also, as I mentioned, obviously if you could get a full tile coming off of the window sill down, that eliminates 2 L cuts on either side. Obviously if you're using big tiles as this, you'll probably have 2 L cuts at the top, depending on how it works out the size of the window. But the bits that you see visually, you can make it a lot nicer, especially if your walls are a bit bumpy. But yeah, like I say, in this particular bathroom, I went for getting a full tile off of the niche here, which is the same on the niche over here. And that gave me a full tile running through the top, so I eliminate L cuts around the top of the window with that. Visually, the niche is at head height here. I didn't want any sort of L cuts around this, wanted a full tile off of this. So I got 2, I couldn't get the bottom of the windowsill, but again, I take that. And sometimes you have to justify your setting out. If you get a couple of things good and then take a compromise and something out, and like I say, the L cut came off, so that was all good. Okay, onto the internals. I just silicone around the bottom sill once again and the back of the trim as one last extra precaution from the amount of water that this sill will take from the shower. Then just following the joints around, I'm tiling both sides first, then my big top tile, which I use 2 props for this one, and I'm using a rapid set so I can make sure I can get the bottom tile finished. Then after about an hour, I remove the props and put the last bottom cut in, giving it a good full as it's in a wet area. And there we go, and I managed to get that symmetrical 5mm gap roughly the same the whole way around with a little bit of prep. How you lay your tile trim is personal preference, but I think these days I lay it like this on 90% of the bathrooms that I do. The designers always specify now that it goes this way when possible, and I agree, I do think it adds that minimal sleek vibe to the bathroom finish. Well, I hope you picked up some good tips there, guys, and if you want to sharpen up your herringbone skills, you can click right here to see how I tiled it inside this niche. You're welcome to like and subscribe. If you like this kind of content, it's free of charge. Catch you in the next one, guys.